How goes it, everybody? Spike Daddy here, and welcome to a talking head video where I talked to some of you guys in that on 7 Days to Die about the whole zombie apocalypse and what would you guys go for instead of a hardware store and so on and so forth. If you haven't, go check those videos out. In that, I kind of talk about it a little bit as I'm playing a game where I shoot zombies. So hey, fun. Um, but this episode is going to be a little bit more kind of along the lines of just being prepared in that kind of sense, and a couple different scenarios. I guess the first and foremost scenario is probably going to be more along the lines of a bushcraft kind of deal, where if you're going out in the woods, you're going camping, you're going hiking, trail riding, so on and so forth, and that kind of aspect. And this can even be kind of brought into even a bug out bag scenario, an inch bag, those sort of things like that. For those of you that don't know, bug out bag, or a bob, a bob bag, or whatever like that. An inch bag is I'm not coming home bag. That's the one where shit has gotten so bad that you have to evacuate and you're not going to come back home potentially forever. You're going to set up a new establishment somewhere else. That's the kind of bags and that kind of emergency preparation for any kind of issue that might happen or emergency that might happen in your area. But we're going to go over a little bit of a bushcraft kind of deal here. So the very first thing that I'm going to talk about here is going to be the 5C's of survivability. It's actually, if I'm not mistaken, yeah, Mr. Dave Canterbury actually kind of posted that up on his site. He's got a site here in that selfrelianceoutfitters.com. And he talks about the 5C's, and these really do make sense. The first thing, of course, is going to be a cutting tool. So a knife, a hatchet, an axe, something that's good, reliable, and sturdy. Something that you can put it through hell and it's going to survive. Not these little Swiss Army knife things where, are multi-tools and stuff like that. Those all have a purpose too. Don't get me wrong. Still carry, a standard pocket knife and still carry a multi-tool and so on and so forth. But don't rely that to be, your big cutter to, help split firewood or help, cut a branch or, to whittle down to a spear point or anything along that kind of lines. You want something a lot more robust. Now, depending on where you live, what region you're in, what state you're in, and what, I don't think I have any internationals in that, but, depending on your environment is really what you should be prepared for. Be prepared for the area that you're going to be in. So if you know for a fact that you're going to go take a trip to the Amazon, well, you're going to want a machete, a really good one for that. You're going to want a bunch of other stuff too, and then, malaria pills, crap like that. But as far as we're going to go off the scenario of being, we'll just say, I guess, up here in Michigan, because that's where I'm familiar with. I'm familiar with Michigan, like it's basically my backyard. A good, sturdy cutting tool. Okay, now a bushcraft knife, they've got them on Amazon. You can go to Cabela's. You can go to places like that where it's a nice full tang, thick blade that is high carbon steel, which can, spark off of flint. So you can that can also start as a combustion tool as well, which is one of the other C's. We'll get to all that later on. I said I was going to do a show and tell. This is the only kind of show and tell I have. I do plan on doing another episode of that where I talk more along the lines of the fun stuff of the zombie apocalypse with the whole melee tools and stuff like that, because I do plan on going to Menards and picking up some stuff that I talked about in the videos. But this right here is a nice bushcraft style knife. It's actually one that quite a few folks in that recommend for your first one in that. It doesn't cost that much. This is a Schrade. It's a Schrade. What is it? A FCF 36. It is the it's a black model. You got that baked on black crap. You can actually get this taken off with a bunch of I think you can get like a nice acetone or a paint thinner and that, and you can actually have that peel off, which I do plan on doing to this one right here. It does come with a standard okay sheath. It does come with a diamond sharpener, which is actually really handy for getting the eventually the rolls on it or the edge is going to dull, and that does help out with the sharpness. This one is relatively sharp. It's not as sharp as I want it to be. I still got to take it through some fine steel and hone it down a little bit more, but that's how it essentially came factory, so I haven't really had a chance to kind of mess with it. With that being said, we can actually go take a look at it and actually see on prices. What is the FCF 36? Yeah, so we'll go here. I'll go ahead and jump over to main display here. So there it is. That's the exact one I have. Oh, thank you, Edge, for popping up. I appreciate you. Can I actually turn you off? Don't show this automatically. Thank you. Go away. Appreciate it. So it is a nice overall knife. Nice knife. It is durable. It is a very thick tang, and the nice thing about this tang too. Oh, wait a minute. Why didn't? Oh, it did pop over. Duh. I'm just looking at my camera to see if I'm just still looking at you guys directly and not looking off to the side. So I have to look at the camera right now. Cool. Great. But this is 1095 high carbon steel. Now the reason why you want 1095 is it's a lot more. It's a lot stronger of a steel. It's holds an edge longer. Plus it's high carbon. So if you spark it to flint, you'll actually get sparks coming off of the carbon blade, which can actually help start a fire, which is also really nice. I guess that's that for that one. We'll jump back over here to the face cam. So that's kind of the one that I would recommend. Like I said, it was a little about 33 bucks or so or something like that. That's a pretty good price for a nice, thick, heavy blade that you know for a fact that if you go to baton, which you baton wood, so you say you got, say you got a log that's about, that big around, but you got to make kindling to start a fire, you can actually take this, put it in the split, hit it with another piece of wood and drive it through and split the wood and split up into smaller pieces to get kindling with your tinder to start a fire. And then of course, the bigger logs in that you'd use with like a pocket saw or a camp saw or a camp axe or something like that. So that's what I would kind of recommend as far as like a cutting tool. Now that doesn't mean that that's the only one you carry. Okay. When you look in the aspect of this right here, you always need to have a fail safe. They always say in that as far as having a cutting tool is good, but you want to have a backup to it. So I'm not saying buy 2 of these and keep them, even though, as long as you got the space to carry, you don't mind the extra weight because they are relatively heavy. I think, what is it? What did this one right here say that it was? I don't think it actually tells me the actual overall weight of it, but it's hefty. It's over a pound. It's a heavy blade. But you also want to have, like I mentioned, your multi-tool that's got another knife on it, another just a regular pocket knife, just a simple. I don't have my pocket knife in this pair of jeans, but just a simple, 3-inch, 4-inch blade pocket knife, foldable blade, or a fixed blade, not one, one that you can do smaller, tedious tags. Because if you're trying to do small carving work or anything like that, anything that takes a lot more dexterity in that big honking blade in that might cut what you're going for, but you're not going to be able to do it with the finesse of a smaller blade. Just like kitchen knives have different purposes, and you got a big chef's knife for chopping veggies and onions and whatever like that. You got smaller steak knives for just cutting steak. You've got a paring knife for cutting nice apple slices and so on and so forth. Same concept when it comes to bringing your own cutting tool. The next thing, of course, on the list in that is going to be a combustion. That kind of goes hand in hand with the cutting tool, because you want to have a good cutting tool, like I was talking about this knife right here, having a 90-degree spine, because one of the biggest and best things out there for starting a fire, in my opinion, aside from, the obvious matches, a Bic lighter, stuff like that, gasoline and a spark kind of thing, is going to be a ferro rod. Now a ferro rod, I actually have one. I don't actually have it up here with me. I'm not prepared. I just got done recording yesterday's video. So basically I got to recording. Actually, I guess maybe not yesterday's video, because I might release this actually before I release yesterday's video, but I recorded this after 7 Days to Die video, and I got so big into talking about being prepared and stuff like that. I'm like, you know what? Screw it. I'm going to make a freaking face video on this. I drank some water, went down the wrong pipe, and I've been recovering ever since. So forgive me if I keep clearing my throat. With that being said, the ferro rod. Now, a ferro rod is, let's go ahead and kick back over to the main display here, and let's go to a ferro rod. Good Lord, if I can type, that would be great. So that's what these right here are. It's a ferrocerium rod. These right here are the ones that I have. I haven't really fully tested it, but it does have a good high rating in that, and I have gotten some really good sparks with it. You get a 2-pack. They do have a hole drilled in there, which you can add cordage to, paracord or whatever like that, to make it easier. And all you do, you do want to get the thicker ones. The smaller ones do work, but the bigger ones, of course, throw more sparks. As you can see right here on the illustration, You basically strike it with a spine of a blade or an actual striker, which is just a regular 90-degree edge steel striker in that, and it throws sparks. Like, it throws sparks. And all you need to do is make yourself a tinder bundle, use that to spark it up to where it catches the sparks, and most of the time you don't even actually have to blow on it in order to get a fire. This stuff right here comes out. It says up to 3,000 degree sparks. I don't know how accurate that actually is. But as far as it being able to start a fire on the spot if you just keep striking it, absolutely. I've seen people actually use some ferro rods in that actually on a blank piece of just regular dried kindling wood and just spark, and boom, catch fire like right then and there. So I've seen them in action. I've used mine a few times and it has worked, and I have started a fire, but that was of course in optimal conditions. This right here, and that does actually help out, especially if it's wet out. If your lighter gets wet or your matches get wet, you always want to have multiple ways of starting fire and having a combustion device. Now there's a couple other cool things that are out there. So if you look up a fire starter piston, here is a cool little thing. I don't know if we're going to find any good ones here on Amazon. But basically what this is, let's see if we can find a cool one here. You know what, we'll do this one right here, a little fire starter kit, because this actually has char cloth and tinder and stuff like that on it. So what this is it's a piston. Now, anybody that is... Okay, that gives a good illustration. We'll leave it there. So anybody that is familiar with a diesel engine, on how it actually compresses the gas to ignition, because when you compress something, it heats up. So what you do is you take this little piston right here, you put tinder at the end, in the little nozzle spot right here, right? And you basically put it inside of the piston there. You cap off the one end, and I'm going to go ahead and switch back over to new camera here. So you take that piston and you pop it as hard as you can, fast as you can. And what that does is that compresses the air and everything that's in there, and it superheats it to where it actually creates the ember. Now all you need to start a fire is an ember and dry tinder. You put that ember inside the dry tinder, blow on it a few times, you'll catch a flame. Now, of course, that's going to be also one of those items in that where it is going to be, you need to have good conditions in order for that to happen. You need to have really good tinder, really good dry tinder, good kindling, and all that stuff like that. And you need to have patience with this, because it might take a couple hits. You really have to smack it down. You probably would be best to actually try smacking it like on a log or something like that. But this is another surefire way to get an ember, to get into tinder, to start a fire. Now, of course, the other options, of course, is to always, go to your gas station, go to your grocery store and that, and pick up a 5-pack of Bic lighters and that, and throw them in your kit. So you got 5 lighters. Now, the off chance of none of those working in the case, I doubt it. You can even get the new lighters that are out now, which are strewn about throughout Menards, and they're just little candle lighters, but they're butane, and they actually have a torch at the end, which actually is still really good, especially in high wind environments. So if you can't get your Bic lighter to work and you don't want to bust out the freaking the piston or the ferro rod, the torch ones in that work too. And on the offset of that, most of those are actually refillable too. So that's another option. Of course, there's other fire starter methods, which of course, is the whole bow and string and all that stuff like that. That takes time and patience, and I would highly recommend you trying it out just a couple times just to see how hard it is. I'm not going to go through the demonstration or anything like that, because I honestly don't have the time for it. That would be a lot of fast forwarding and a lot of sweat and tears. So, one of the other one is a what is it? It's a magnesium fire starter. So here's a different version of the ferro rod. Now it's still a striker. It still has a ferro rod on it. However, what it has magnesium. So that little like aluminum looking block, that's actually magnesium. So what you do is you do this right here. You scrape it into a little bit of a tinder, or you could just scrape it just like that. And when you hit it with a striker, that magnesium in that just lights up. It catches flame even better than regular tinder would. So that's another option to have. So I try to have in my little kit when I go camping, or when I go hunting mainly, actually, not even when I go camping because I got a cabin. But when I go hunting, I always carry at least 3 different ways to start a fire. Now, the more ways to start a fire, the better. Now, I carry 3. I carry a couple lighters on me. I carry matches, and I carry my ferro rod. I also carry one of these too. I have used one of these. They do work out really well. Um, but they are smaller. These don't look that, they look big on here, but when you see the size of it that he's holding onto there, yeah, not that big, doesn't throw a lot of sparks, but the magnesium does kind of make up for it. Once again, another case scenario in that where it may not be optimal conditions and things may be a little bit damp, you can't really find good tinder, you can create a nice huge pile like what that guy that illustrated right there did, and you can light that, and that'll actually burn long enough, hopefully, to where it catches tinder on fire. So that's the other part of the second C, I guess you could call it. The next one, let me go ahead and pop back over to here. There are going to be a lot of transitions back and forth here. Is going to be cover. One thing, especially bushcraft wise in that, you can make cover out of pine boughs. You can do all that sort of stuff like that, right? However, it's not waterproof. It's not waterproof. You know, they may say it helps with the rain and that, you're still going to get wet. It's unless you're in the Bahamas and you've got palm trees where you can make basically layered shingles, you're going to get wet anywhere up here in the northern states because there's just not enough foliage that is big enough to actually do that. Even ferns and all that stuff like that, they're not made to do that in that sense right there. You could layer it enough to where you don't get wet, but that takes a lot of time, energy, calories, so on and so forth. So what's the other best alternative? The other best alternative, guys, is going to be a tarp. Just a simple tarp, a simple 8 by 10 tarp that you can pick up for $12. You can even get bigger ones. So here's one for $20. Different colors, which is actually a nice thing. That's a 6 by 8. No. 8 by 10. Okay, it's $25. Sorry, my apologies. $25. This one right here is a thicker material one. If I'm not mistaken, I've got one similar to this I picked up at Menards for, I think it was about the same price or so. But you can get it in different colors, which is nice. You know, sometimes you might want to be maybe a little bit hidden, go with the dark green. Maybe sometimes you want to be spotted, go with the light blue. Or there's probably, you could even probably find them in all sorts of colors. You could probably find them in hot freaking pink if you wanted to. You know, the brighter the color, the better when it actually comes to your covers, especially if you're hoping to be found and hoping to be rescued. So that's one of the biggest things there. The other thing too is you could just use a simple trash bag. Carry yourself like a 55-gallon drum liner. Let's take a look at that. 55-gallon drum liner. 150 of them for $50. Now, granted, that's relatively expensive, but I'm sure you can find just regular drum liners, $22 for a whole bunch of them. And you can carry 2, 3, 4 of them and not even feel the weight difference in your backpack. And these have multiple uses outside of coverage. If you're in an area in the fall time, say you're up here in Michigan and that during the fall time. Well, during the daytime and that, it can be nice. It can be about 70 degrees, a little breezy, not too bad, maybe a slight little sprinkle of a shower. But at nighttime and that, you're almost dipping down into the frost area as far as the temperature goes. So what do? Well, if you're out and about by yourself, you sure as hell ain't bringing a sleeping bag. I mean, if you did, great, that's great. But if you're out hiking or you're biking, say, let's do the hypothetical on that and say you're going through a trail system, you're biking. Your tire blows out. You're 5, 6, 7 miles or so away in that, and it's becoming dark. Well, you're sure as hell ain't going to navigate your way through the trails, especially possibly going the wrong way. Some trails up here in Michigan and that can go for 20 miles before you even see civilization. So what do you do then? What do you do for heat? Well, you got your combustion, you can make a fire, but you're not going to sleep on a bed of coals. That's not going to happen. So what do you do? Well, if you have a couple of drum liners or a couple trash bags, contractor bags. I'm not talking about these little Glad stretchy bags and that freaking get pierced by, a simple corner of a cardboard box. I'm talking about heavy duty construction grade contractor bags. You carry 3, 4 of those. You can actually stuff it with leaves for insulation and, well, essentially make yourself a wonderful do-it-yourself, very rustic sleeping bag. Or say you don't want to lay on the hard ground on that. Well, guess what? Take 2 or 3 of those or so, stuff them full of leaves in that, and then you got yourself a nice little mattress, basically. There's all sorts of different ways and uses in that for trash bags and that. I do carry a single one with me in that, and that's mainly because if I do have to sleep out in the woods and that, I don't want to. I hate sleeping on the ground. That's why I don't camp in a tent. I mean, unless they bring a mattress or one of those inflatable mattresses and that, because I've done that before. I've woken up in that with a freaking part of a root sticking in my back and that, and it's absolutely hell. I've been there, done that. Don't want to do it again. Just bring a couple trash bags and that, stuff it full of leaves and foliage and stuff like that, and call it good. That's the way that I see it there. Now, of course, there's other different purposes and other different uses for the garbage bag, which makes it a really, really good thing to just carry in general, just because it has multi-use. Now, a tarp has got multi-use too. You can use that for shelter, for cover, string it up in that, which we'll talk about later on in that when it comes to cordage, as far as, being able to actually put it up and make a little tent or whatever like that. But the other aspect of a tent too is if you need to lay out an area and you don't want to have a whole bunch of leaves and dirt and all that stuff like that, you can use that as just a foundation to place your tent. That's actually a really good idea to have a liner underneath your tent just to help out with that. So that's one of the biggest things there. Another couple other admirable things in that to actually have too is a space blanket. Those do work very well, and you can use them even though some of them are very, very fragile. You can use them as coverage, and it actually helps reflect the heat from the fire. So that helps out as well. You can even get tarps that actually have that emergency blanket actually stitched into it on one side, and that's probably the best case, but I think those are pretty expensive in a comparison. I guess next we'll talk about cordage, because that kind of goes hand in hand with coverage. So along with the tarp, you need to find a way to, make a shelter out of it, put it over your head, do a little lean-to, a little Boy Scout action. So you need to have some kind of cordage. Now, everybody in the world, whenever they hear of cordage and preparedness, they think immediately 550 paracord. Now, what 550 paracord is, for those of you that don't know, paracord, good paracord, not the old cheap shit that you get off of freaking Amazon, like actual USA made or actual good paracord in general, is cord. Let me just go ahead and look it up here. Let's see if we can get some decent illustrations here. See if I can find a good brand, actually. I want to get one that has illustration with the strands in the interior, because for those of you that don't know, the strands inside, let's see if I can find it. I guess it doesn't actually have it. Can I find it on here? Yes, I can. Perfect. Okay. Can I blow this image up? We're just going to go to a random site here that happens to have it here. Okay, there we go. We can do this one right here. So, reason why they call it 550 paracord. 550 is supposedly for the test pound strength of tension that it can hold. Now, traditional paracord, 550, and that has got 7 strands inside. This one right here, what the heck? Yeah, 7 strands, 2 inner strands for this particular brand that we're looking up here. But normally it's got 7 strands inside of thinner nylon inside, then you have the outer shell. Each one of these strands should be able to hold 50 pounds. So there's 7 of them, that's 350. The other 200 pounds comes from the outer shell being able to support 200. That's hence the reason for 550. 550 pounds, each strands and everything like that. Now, the reason why paracord is so popular is because of the fact that it has multiple uses outside of just being cordage. You can strip the outer shell, and you can have individual thinner ones that have been, I haven't seen, but I've heard of people using it even for stitching, for stitching up a wound, because these things can be unraveled as well, to have actually finer strands. I've heard of people using it for even fishing line, or for even making a net. You got plenty of, say you got 100-foot hank, a 100-foot hank, or a hank is like what you see here. Like, let's go up. So something like this, like a nice roll of that right there would be, 550. Or would be considered a hank, would be considered, here, let's just go here. So you can get different sizes. I choose this one right here, and that's got a high rating and everything like that. I normally just buy mine like at Menards, and that they normally have Paracord there. Same with Home Depot, but you can get all different kind of colors. Like I said, if you want to be really bright yellow, holy crap, that's bright. Or if you want to be somewhat, camoed out or whatever like that, you can go with that as well. I personally like having both. I normally carry two 100-foot hanks of them, and a hank is just how they roll it up, and that just makes it easier for transportation. I normally carry 200-footers. One is normally black or a darker color in that for, just not seeing it, whatever like that. And then, of course, I carry one in that that's actually normally like a orange, hunter's orange or whatever like that. And cordage can be used for so many other things outside of just stringing up something or tying up something. It could be used for trail marking. Like, for example, say you've got this wonderful, holy crap, hot neon piston pink, right? And you want to mark a trail. Well, if you cut off, 3 or 4, you cut off like 4 or 5 inches or so of it, tie it around a branch, boom. It's going to be pretty hard to miss a freaking holy shit, that's hot pink sitting there in the middle of the woods where everything is brown and green and whatever like that. So it's nice for doing that, nice for marking a trail, nice for, just doing anything like that in general. And of course, the whole aspect of it is it ties in with the cover to where it is used to string up your shelter, basically. So even if you don't have a tarp, you could still use this in different knot techniques to actually build a shelter and still make a lean-to with, just pine boughs or just wood sticks that you find, make it all nice and straight, and you can still do that as well. So there's different uses for cordage, and that's the reason why, of course, you don't really want to go out in the woods or anything like that without having some kind of cordage, especially if you need to, especially if you need to, tie off anything or say, just there's just I got so many things going through my head on what it could be used for. I don't know what to say on it. So that's the reason for it. Cordage is always good. Now, Paracord, of course, like I said, is the number one that everybody talks about and everything like that. What a lot of people don't talk about is they don't talk about tarred bank line. Now, tarred bank line. So here's where it gets a little bit more interesting in this particular case. Now, there's different kinds of bank line in that. I'm going to go ahead and show you just this one right here on Amazon. $10 for 120 feet of tarred bank line. Now, the nice thing about the tarred bank line is it's still nylon, but it's actually covered in a tar when it's made. So it's actually far more weather resistant than what paracord is. If you leave paracord out for a long duration in that, the UV from the sun, the moisture, the rot is still going to take effect. Now, tarred bank line is tarred. It actually is a lot more weather resistant than the latter. So you can get it different kind of availabilities in that here. You can get it, in quarter pound or 1 pound. So it doesn't hold as much, of course, as what paracord is, but it definitely serves more of a purpose. It's a lot thinner strand. There's different sizes in that for the thickness. You can get it really, really, really thin, or you can get it, a little bit thicker. Now, this right here is also used for possibly setting up traps or for doing, a little bit finer on the knots. Or say you're trying to set up say for example in that you're trying to, well, for one, if you're in a very, very, very wet situation, like it's downpour, raining and everything like that, and it needs to hold, the tarred bank line I think is going to be a better option than the paracord in my opinion. Because whenever for a fact that whenever nylon gets wet, it becomes very slick. Well, this right here kind of helps prevent that aspect. So those are the type of cordages that I would, recommend. Now, there are other cordages, of course, out there and that they do serve its purpose. Regular twisted twine is one that doesn't really have that much value as far as holding stuff up. It can get you by in a pinch, but the other nice thing about twisted twine is the fact that you can actually take it, peel it apart, and create your own tinder out of it. So that actually helps out with starting a fire. And all these things you'll kind of notice, they kind of go hand in hand here. So that covers 4 of the 5. The last one is going to be a container. Now, containers can vary anywhere from a plastic jug or anything like that. But in a more realistic aspect, if you're going out on our hypothetical on a trail ride or whatever like that, you're going to want to carry. And so in this scenario right here, say you ran out of water, which hopefully you don't, because you should carry at least a couple of liters of water with you when you go out biking or whatever like that, especially if you're going on a long bike ride. Now, if you're going on a short bike ride and that, like I was showing off in my videos and that, I'm not worried about anything there. We're literally, even if we went to the far end, it's literally a mile and the main line is lit up by lights. Not worried about that out there whatsoever. However, long bike ride, you might run out of water, especially if you blew a tire and you got to walk back or you got to wait till morning. Water that you might find in a creek or something like that could have parasites, could have, stuff like that. It's always best to boil your water. To boil water, you need to have a nice freaking container that can withstand the heat. So normally you want to get like a nice stainless steel single wall container. You don't want to get a double wall. You don't want to get like a Yeti or an insulated one like that, because that pressure inside is going to build up and you're going to blow you're going to blow it up basically. Or you can get like a canteen and a cup set and carry it around with you. Those actually are quite nice. Let's see here. Canteen and cup. There's a whole bunch to choose from. But I don't have the canteen. Actually, I think we do have the canteen up north of the cabin, but I use these cups right here all the time when I'm hunting to boil water to make coffee when I'm out in the blind and whatever. And these right here work great. Just a simple one like this, nice stainless steel one. I wouldn't go with aluminum. Aluminum deforms too much, and I just not a fan of aluminum. I would go stainless steel 24/7. So this one right here doesn't look like it's too bad. That is all stainless. Does have a nice little handle on it, which is a kind of a weird looking handle actually compared to the others. But it's also a stainless steel canteen as well. So if you needed to, you could boil with the canteen as well, as long as it's not, a dual wall or a two-walled container. But you mainly would want to use the actual cup right there to actually boil the water in to purify it, to kill any parasites or anything along that lines. And that's really about the only kind of containers that I would recommend. Once again, depending on your environment, depending on your situation and that, or where you're going to be going, that's where you'd want to determine it. Are you going in the desert? Bring a shit ton of water. Have a life straw. Those work wonders. Have a life straw to where in the morning in that, you can actually find in some places of the desert and that you can actually find, even frozen spots, because it does get really pissing cold in the desert. You can even find frozen spots, crack a little bit of ice there, or wait for it to freaking, thaw out, and you can drink the water right there from a life straw. Now that's not on the list of the 5 C's, because of course it doesn't start with a C. Life straw does not start with that, but you still need a container for it. Plus, not only just to boil water, but you want to cook food too, right? I mean, you could do it the old-fashioned way in that and throw a nice flat top rock on there and, fry up a rabbit or squirrel or whatever like that the hell you find on a rock. But really, it probably would make more sense than that, just to cut it up and make a little stew out of it and throw it inside of a container to boil it and whatever like that. So those are mainly the 5 C's that I'm aware of, and that would be always a good thing to have whenever you're in the kind of that environment. And that's going to be kind of goes in tail as well with the 3's rule of survival, which I'm going to talk about now. I'm not going to look this up. This is going off of my knowledge, so if I'm wrong, definitely correct me. If not, if I don't correct myself, just saying it's not right. So the 3 C's of survival, or not 3 C's. Good Lord, you can tell it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. I need to go to bed. I shouldn't even be doing this video. The 3's of survival. The 3's of survival basically states that 3 minutes without oxygen, 3 hours without shelter, 3 days without water, and I think it's 3 weeks without food or something along that lines. So those are the 3's rule. So of course, well, you're not going to be alive after 3 minutes without oxygen. So not good. 3 hours without shelter. Now, depending on your environment, if it's a nice sunny day, 80 degrees outside, sun is shining, everything's great like that, don't have to worry about it too much. Now, In worst case scenario, say it's, 50 degrees outside, it's raining, you can't get out of the rain, you're going to get hypothermia. A lot of people don't realize that. A lot of people, you get hypothermia really freaking quick because it just soaks you to the bone. You're going to get cold. And without any kind of heat or anything like that for shelter. Now, shelter kind of goes hand in hand with heat and fire and all that stuff too. So that kind of, if you don't have that, 3 hours in a bad environment like that, you're going to catch hypothermia, which is going to make you sick and you're going to die. The other one was 3 days without water. Of course, you need to have water. You'll dehydrate yourself to death, especially depending on your environment. Now, if you're in optimal environment, 3 days. If you're in the desert, definitely way less than 3 days. Especially if you're also in like the swamps of Georgia or someplace like that, like humid, you'll sweat it out too. You'll dehydrate even faster. Then of course, 3 weeks without food. That's a pretty much a no-brainer. That you don't eat for 3 weeks in that unless you're unless you've got a very large amount of fat reserve. Even so, you're still not going to survive after 3 weeks without food just because of the pure fact that you're not going to have the energy, essentially, especially, I mean, some people may not even have the energy in that after a week without food or even a couple of days without food. But as far as the body, the average body in that goes, 3 weeks without food, you'll perish. So those are the basic 3's of survival, I guess you could say. So you need to make sure that you can address those 3 C's. Well, don't sit underwater for more than 3 minutes, or make sure you got, breathing atmosphere, for 3 minutes. The shelter one, of course, is the number one thing. Whenever you're in a survival situation, you're lost in the woods, you're hunting, you got turned around. I've actually had that happen before, to where I was actually coming into the blind and our markers in that got messed up. This was, I think it was about the first year I think I went actually out there by myself, where Dad actually sat at the cabin with Grandpa, as opposed to me and him going out there and splitting our ways. Because normally we would hunt really close together, like within like 75, 100 yards or so. He would split off and go to his blind, I would split off and go to my blind, and that's what we did. But I think it was the first or second year that I went out there, and I didn't go out there prior to set any bait or anything like that, because I, working and all that stuff like that, and I forgot to set up new trail markers, because over time those little reflective trail markers and that, they die out, or they don't, whatever like that. And it was coming down, it was raining really hard, so everything was reflecting light, and I got off course. I'm like, all right, I don't know where the hell I'm at, and it was pouring fucking rain. Thankfully, I did have a rain poncho in that already, because it was pouring rain when I left the cabin. And I basically sat there under a tree and I waited and waited and waited. And then daylight came. I'm like, oh shit, I know where I'm at. I'm literally the one freaking, like, I was basically walking in the right direction. If I would actually kept walking, I would have walked right up on the blind from the left side, as opposed to walking up to it on the right side. I was just off by like 10, 20 feet. But that's that scenario. What about the scenario in that where you don't have a shelter to go to? That blind is waterproof, so it's nice. Now, what happens if here's our wonderful hypothetical: trail riding, by yourself, or even better yet, maybe you're with a friend, which is the best way to do it, because you shouldn't go trail riding or do any kind of hiking by yourself in any way situation. So you want to make sure to have a means of shelter, and that's the very first thing that you should always focus on. When you finally determine that, okay, I'm not going to get out of here tonight, I need to establish a base of some sort. You always need to solidify that and go, okay, you know what? Here looks like a nice, good flat place. It's higher off the ground. There's no water. It's not going to be as wet. This is where we're going to set it up. Boom. First thing you should do, take your tarp out, get it up, and make sure it's nice and dry. And then you work on your fire, and then you gather firewood, or gather enough firewood, I should say, enough to get the fire going, especially if you got a partner with you. Have him go out looking for firewood while you get everything set up and ready to go. That's the very first thing that you need to worry about, because of the whole 3's rule. You don't want to go, oh shit, I got no food with me, I have no shelter, I'm hungry, I'm going to go look for food right now. Well, that's kind of dumb, because, well, you can go quite a long time without food, as much as your stomach would tell you otherwise, of course. But you can't go that long without having shelter, especially if the weather is bad. If the weather is bad, that needs to be your very, very, very first priority. And then, of course, after that, water. How long are you going to be there for? Now, if you're in the scenario that I gave, where you're just trail riding with a friend or whatever like that, you got a blown tire, you're going to have to walk the bike out basically in that, but it's a good 5-6 mile walk, and it's getting nighttime, and, your light, your flashlight or whatever like that, and your bike and that isn't working in that, and your buddy doesn't want to leave you. You guys are going to stay the night in the woods. Cool. That's no big deal. It really is no big deal, to be honest, even during bad weather, as long as you've got proper coverage and so on and so forth. But say you're out there for more than that. Say you're out there for a couple days. Well, then you got to start thinking about water, because, of course, after 3 days without water, that's not going to be a happy time. You're going to definitely have dehydration. And for anybody that has actually been dehydrated, oh hell, here's a better example. Anybody that has had a hangover, that's dehydration. That's what a hangover is. A hangover is an absolute dehydration, because the alcohol basically gets rid of all the water in your system. That's why you piss so much when you drink alcohol. In my opinion, it's a diuretic, I think, or something like that. Same thing with coffee and all that stuff like that. That's why whenever I get done drinking coffee in the morning, and then I try to drink a good amount of water throughout the day, just because I know for a fact that coffee dehydrates you. So that's another kind of scenario in that case right there. But in the scenario that we're talking about, I guess water wouldn't really be that big of a deal, because if you're biking, you should always have a good amount of water in that. Of course, keep yourself hydrated, because you're going to be sweating and so on. But in a worst case scenario, if you're 20 miles out and you can only move at 10 miles a day or whatever like that, and you have to set up another camp, well, then you got to start thinking about finding water, using your container, boil the water, drink the water, so on and so forth. In any kind of scenario, hopefully there's no scenario where you have to go out and find food if you're ever in that situation, because finding food in a survival situation is tough. Now, I say it's tough because I've been hunting. I've been hunting for partridge, for rabbit, for deer and all that stuff like that. And the probable time of getting said item, I guess not really item, but said animal, is far and few, especially if you're not carrying a firearm. You're not carrying a firearm, you're not carrying a bow, you're not carrying anything like that that can actually harvest said animal. And you got to rely on traps and hoping, or hopefully you're next to a creek that has trout in it, or small fish that you can cook up or whatever like that. You got to start looking at other options. That's when you got to be familiar with your whole environment and what plants are edible, and you kind of get the idea where I'm kind of going at here. So that's the whole 3's rules of survival, along with the 5C's of survival as well. So that's kind of the whole gist of it there. I'm actually going to call the little video here in that, guys. That's probably enough to kind of take in there. I'd love to hear you guys' comments, especially like the locations where you guys are at. What kind of environments are you guys dealing with? That'd be really good news. Not really good news, but just good information in that, especially for those of us that don't know. I mean, I know Michigan quite well. I know the northern areas quite well. So maybe some of you guys live in the South. Maybe some of you guys are international. Maybe you guys are out, across the big water. So love to hear some of you guys' feedback on that in this video. If you guys enjoyed the video, of course, and that you don't like the button, click on that thingy dingy down there, that little red button that says subscribe and that, whatever. And just give me some good feedback, I guess, or even if it's bad feedback, just let me know what you think. So, but guys, until next episode, take care, take it easy.